Hey guys, today I'm going to bring in a very interesting episode on how to build a Android application using Kotlin. So I am coming back to Android app development after maybe 5 years because I've been primarily focusing on iOS development using Swift for some time now because I had picked up that language, as well as I wanted to scale in terms of my tech skill on iOS. But then I am right now an engineering leader and need to cater to multiple platforms and technologies, not just mobile and even web. So I thought it's pretty interesting that I shift ships, not completely, but then also try to understand how the new way of Android development is working these days, because lots of things have emerged from the time I had been building. It was find view by ID. That was the way I used to program when Android was there, and then data binding was evolving maybe around 5 years back. Then now I see there are lots of stuff evolved, like Kotlin as a language has come in. Then you have live data, and I am also hearing something called as state flow, which is existing, and MVVM as such has become the favorite for Android platform building. At least it is coming packaged with Android. That's what I see. You can include it and start building your view models very easily, compared to, let's say, if I had to build something on iOS, I had to create the whole boilerplate myself. So these are some of the interesting things I am right now looking into, because data binding as such is huge for me, because I had been working on functional programming using React, using RX Swift, and even combined on iOS recently. So coming to iOS live data and data binding, it's a little different, not like the regular RX way of doing things, but then it's pretty interesting in how you program it. So that's what I am looking at right now. So today, to start with, as a baby step, because data binding is new for me, live data is new for me, even state flow is new for me. Kotlin is pretty well new for me, but I can always compare it with Swift. But then to start with, I'm not going to go too much way ahead and then do something complicated, but instead I'm going to start with a very simple flow, a login UI workflow, where I do a little bit of validation at the beginning to show how data binding works, and then we can take it from there. So without much delay, let's get started. So let's start by building a basic application using Android Kotlin. I'm going to bring in an application which is going to be a very simple login feature, but not without hitting the APIs to make a request to the server and all. That's not in the scope. Maybe we'll just start with validating the fields and then enabling and disabling the fields based on data binding. So that's what we are going to look at to begin with. So I'm going to start bringing in that by adding a new activity, a new Android project and activity. I'm going to call it as a login module. The application is going to be called login, and I'm just going to say folder name being login Kotlin. Language used will be Kotlin. I'm going to point to minimum SDK version of API 30, which is Android 11, and let's create that. So let's create a blank project. So this is not going to do much, and if you let the Gradle build happen, and then let's see what happens after we run. It's not going to show anything because we have started with an empty activity. So that Gradle build is complete, and if I try to run this right now, you can see it will just throw an error saying there is no initial activity set. So that's what the next step we are going to do. So there is no launch activity created yet, which we need to make it as default. So let's start by creating a new activity under the login, the package. So let's create a new activity. I'm going to make it maybe an empty activity. I don't need anything, so I'm just going to call it login activity. Generate the layout, which will be activity underscore login XML will be created, and we can make it as the launcher activity. The source language is Kotlin, so I'm just going to do a finish. So that creates me the basic page needed. So because we already made it as the default activity, so once I start let's say if I run this app right now, it's going to show me one screen with that layout which is added right now. So let's look at that. Still running. In a minute it's going to launch. Yep, so we have this login screen launching, but then idea is to have some fields populated. I'm going to have a title for this page, and then maybe the username, email field and password, and then maybe a button to add that. So let's get started with that. I'm going to go to the layout. This is my activity login. This is my screen to start with. I'm going to add it's already I like the code part more than the other one, so I'm going to start with adding a linear layout, the old ways which I was comfortable with. I'm going to start with that, and I'm going to say match parent, so that this linear layout is going to consume all of the real estate available within this view. That's my linear layout, and I'm going to start adding now views, a text view to start with. I'm going to say width can be match parent and wrap the content. So I think it will already start showing that as soon as. So that's my the text view. I'm going to add a text for that, which is going to be, maybe I can call it account. I think it should start already showing in the layout. If you had the layout, let's create a split view to show both. So it's already showing this account, which is not editable anyway. So it will ask me to move to the strings folder, extract that, and I can maybe I can just call it as account underscore label something. That'll go to the strings. It'll go under this strings account label. It's already there. You already have the app name which is created, so you already have some information to start with. And I also need this to be center aligned, so maybe I can just say text alignment can be center. So that's say center line now, and maybe also the color of the font, text color, I want to be black maybe, and I'll make it as black. Also I want the font size or the text size to be a little more. I can maybe call it 20 SP. Guess that's enough. And then let's keep a top margin as well, layout margin at the top. I'm gonna keep it as a pretty decent 60 dp or something. So that's moved a little down. That's a text view. I mean, that's a text view. And then let's add those editable fields, which is username and password. It needs an edit text field for that. Match parent, wrap content. So width is going to be match parent, other one being wrap content. And let's add an ID to it, because we need this to be exposed to the layout side. So let's add an ID. I'm gonna call it as email text or something. Yep, you can call it as email text. And then I'm just gonna add a placeholder, which in this case is a hint. So if you're coming from an iOS background, then placeholder is nothing but a hint over in iOS. In Android, so hint can be enter email. So I guess linear layout needs an orientation. That's the reason it's still not still struggling to understand what's going on. So that's, again, if you are coming from iOS, then you pretty much know that you are putting it within a stack view, then you set an orientation even there. So stacking vertically or horizontally. So that's pretty much what we did here. And again, I just want some margin between these guys. So I can just keep it as margin top of 20 dp as the margin. And also it's just at least holding the sides of these view, which I don't want. So maybe I can add a padding on left and right. Padding left of 20 and padding right of 20. So I don't know whether these are the the better ways of doing layouts these days, but I will look into that later when I pick up something on laying out the stuff. Currently I'm just using the older ways where I just used to do it this way. So I can even extract the string and call it enter email label or something. It's a placeholder, right? That's also moved. Edit text is done. Now why is that it's in a different shade? Maybe because that's still in highlight. So let's create the password field now. Edit text, again match parent, wrap content. Then I'm gonna also add an ID. I'm just gonna call it password text, and password does not need a hint. Even if, let's say, give a hint, let's see, enter password, guess that's also fine, but then we have to make it a secured field. So we need to call the input type to be password, which can be a text password, I can say. So then that becomes a better secured field where as soon as you make an input, it's not visible. So that's the other part which I did right now. And I don't know why it's in a different color. Input type for maybe for this can be it can be a plain text, I guess. That's enough. Input type. So there are so many colors right now. Okay, I need to anyway pass this, extract the string, enter password label. Even that's moved out right now. And in the input type, okay, can I just say it's asking me to make it as text email address. That's a good suggestion. I really like the laying out part of Android, because there are so many suggestions and help that keep popping up, which it makes it a little easier. And I don't know why I still have a different color grading over here. Maybe I don't see any. It's still asking me to put some of more stuff before it can stop giving me. Yeah, I think important for autofill. I don't know. So it's asking me to include even that. It's more for autofill hints, like what is that you want to give as a hint. So I guess I don't want that. Maybe that's something I would avoid. Like as soon as you start entering something, it starts giving you hints. So I guess autofill hints, no. Even here I'll keep. So I think that is pretty much what I would keep for these two fields. And let's add one button now. Wrap content, match parent. Okay, the other way. With this match parent, height is wrap content, and ID, again it needs an ID button login, I'll call it. And then I need a text for that, which should be login. So that's it. So that's my login button. Again, I can move this to a string label. That's pretty much what I need. It's a decent looking button. Maybe I can also add a margin to the top. Okay, that's okay. Nice looking login field. We have created it, and now this is what we are going to use for data binding. The regular way would have been easier, but then that's not the intention here. We're going to use the data binding way. So for that, we need to set up some of the initial configurations within our gradle before that will start working. Let's say we'll have to also use a view model for data binding. So all of that we have to use for to make this work. So let's get started with that right now. So our layout is ready. To start with, let's go to our build Gradle and then change for this module login app. Let's go there and then make some modifications. So first thing first, we need something called as a Kotlin capped, which is an annotation processor used by Kotlin, which is pretty much used for our data binding. So I'm going to include that one to start with. So we are going to use Kotlin KAPT Kotlin annotation processor tool. So that's included, and it will ask me to sync the Gradle. Because of that change, we can make that change together, but I was just showing you that first. And then we need a couple of more things to be included here. One other thing is that we do not have anything for data binding yet on this. Let me go back. It's not here. So I guess we need to add something for data binding. So let's just do that to begin with. So for that, I need to add something over under build features. We don't have that here. So we will have to add that after build types maybe. So Kotlin options, we have Kotlin option, but we don't have a build feature. So let's add build features non-existent. So we can include that. Starting with, we need ViewBinding to be set to true. That's one thing we need. And then the other part is we also need data binding to be also available. So I guess data binding is not showing yet, so we can keep the ViewBinding part, because I think we need to add some implementation for data binding to work. So before that, let's go to include some of the things. One is the Android X lifecycle extensions, which we need to add. That's one thing we need to add. So let's include that. I think data binding is fine. We can include that. Data binding set to true. I think if you do a sync now, if there are any issues, it's going to show up. I don't think that's pretty good enough. And then let's do an implementation for Android X dot it's from lifecycle lifecycle extensions. I'm going to use the version 2.2.0. it's a version which was used, and now if I sync, there are no mistakes. If I have made here, then it's going to pop up right away. If not, it's going to compile or at least sync. So at least the basic stuff, I guess I've covered the basic stuff we needed to set up data binding, which is the Kotlin capped. First thing is that, and then I also included build features, which is ViewBinding and data binding, a couple of things. And the other part is that I included lifecycle extensions, which is again something which I needed for enabling data binding. So that's also done. Pretty good enough to start with data binding now. So because we did all of that, we can start including the required things, which is first thing is I need a view model to start with. So let me go to this folder, or at least this side of the main default location, and then let me add a new package for view models. So I'm gonna say login.viewmodels, and then I'm gonna include a view model class. I think that can be a basic class. So I'm gonna call it login view model. It's a basic Kotlin class, and that's the basic login module. But what are the things that I'm going to do with this login view model? So basically it has to capture the information of the email entered, and then I have the password entered, and then also it has to enable or disable the login button. And also some other things which it has to do is on click of the login button, it has to validate or at least do a call to the server and then make a response based on what is available from the server. But that's not in the scope. But at least we will have that implementation without the server call. But something like we can mock it, like we are making a call to the view model in turn responds back saying the user is logged in, and then we can show some toast message from the activity. So then we can at least cover the basics to start with. So those are the things we are going to start doing right now. And what is the view model going to have? Let's look at that. So I'm going to open up the view model, just refer it once. So view model has to implement a couple of things. One is there is a view model available with Android X lifecycle. So that's what we implemented right now. So that is coming with Android X, the lifecycle extension which we created. So we are implementing that and then calling its basic constructor. Plus we also need something called as an observable to look at all the changes which is happening. It is going to be observable itself. Okay, so that's the other part which we need to implement. I guess I have implemented the right observable. It's going to be from Android X DataBinding.observable. I think I did it from the wrong location. So import has to be from, let's see, observable. It has to be from Android X DataBinding. So I made the wrong implementation there. Then this is going to ask me to implement a couple of members, I guess. Let's just add and remove, which anyway we are just going to keep it blank for the time being because we are not going to handle it at this point in time. So I'm just gonna remove this to do, because that implementation will come at a later point. So I'm just going to keep it as an empty implementation for the time being. So that's the first implementation we'll have to do when we create or implement the view model and the observable. So view model is coming directly from the Android X data binding extension. So that's pretty cool because at least in iOS and everywhere we had to only create everything from scratch, and here it's boilerplate and it's readily available for consumption. You just need to instantiate and then do whatever stuff that we want to do. The first step is that we need to enable and disable the login button based on entry made onto the email and password field. So for that, I'm going to start with a field called enable login. It's going to be a val. That means I'm going to just initialize it right away, enable login, and that one is going to be of a specific type called so this is where I'm going to start consuming live data as such. So enable login is going to listen to a couple of other live data instances from any change to login, email or password is what it is going to listen to. So to enable that, we need to use something called as a mediator live data. So technically I don't know how this works, but this is something we have to use. If I go to the implementation, starts to listen to given live data on change. So this is going to listen to some other events occurring in some other live data source, and then every change it's going to listen, and then based on its changes we can do modifications to our observable or something. So this is enable login case, which is going to listen to the email as well as the password fields. So that's the reason I'm going to keep it as mediator live data, and it's going to be of type boolean. That means because enabling or disabling a button is going to get bound to a boolean, because in enabled as such is of type boolean. So that's the reason I'm keeping it as a boolean. So mediator live data instance is created right now. So this is what I'm going to use for enabling or disabling the button, the login button. The next part is going to be a two-way binding. Anyway, this any change which is going to happen to email or password field is going to go back and forth. So and that's the reason I'm going to keep it as bindable. This has to be bound with the layout. So this is where the data binding part is kicking in right now. I'm going to use an annotation at bindable, which in turn it's going to get converted to all the elements like find view by ID and all that observable working with this. So I'm going to create something called as a bindable as a field annotation, and then I'm going to create an email field which is going to be of type mutable live data, a changing live data, and it's going to be of type string, and I can instantiate that mutable live data now. So no initial value. So my email field is done. Now I need a similar field for password, which I can call password. Again, password is also going to be a mutable live data string, mutable live data. That's also done. So we have two fields created for data binding. I think let's compile it once and see. I don't know the shortcut for compiling. At least I'm just getting used to Android Studio once again. So compilation, I'm hoping there are no issues here. So I don't know why. Okay, build apk event log. That's all good. So apk building is fine. So it was successfully done. So this part is working fine. So we have these two fields enabled already. Now what we need to do is to set up some initial things which can be done inside an init within my login Viewmodel class. And whatever I'm going to do is to set up these observables to listen to the changes happening on email, which can be listened by the enable login, which I created as a mediator live data. So I'm going to do that. I'm just going to say enable login at source. So this is pointing to the source on which the enable login has to listen to changes. So first one is going to be email, and I need to show what should happen on, let's say, a change in email. Whenever there is a change in email is happening, I need to show something over here. So that's the first part. Again, that's not the only source I need to listen to. I also need to listen to password as well. So whenever there is a change in password, I also need to listen to it and do some stuff whenever those things are happening within these closures. So let's write a function, a private function, to handle those changes. I'm going to say validate login is the function for me, and I'm going to use this within this closure right now. So validate login is what I'm going to call. So any validation happening is going to get reflected over here, and it's just going to set something. Maybe this is where I'm going to set this enable logins value based on the changes. So that's what I'm going to do. So all that I'm going to do is enable login dot value. I'm going to set whenever the validate login gets called. So this is like whenever an email change happens, enable login is listening to those changes, and when those changes are happening, I do the enabling or disabling of the button within the validate login. So that's what I'm going to do. Enable login dot value is going to check first thing for email, whether it is email dot value is going to be null or blank. That's the first check it's going to do. I think null or blank is what is coming from Kotlin. It used to be null or empty before, so I guess this might be a better way. If not, you can revert back to the older Java way of null or empty. So it's going to see whether, because it has to, this value has to be set to be a boolean. So we need to, this returns a boolean. So if it's not null or empty, then set it to true or false. That's what I'm doing. So enable login if this is not empty, or if password value is not empty. That's a 2 checks. But then we also have an email field, so we have to make sure that the user is entering a proper email field. So we can also extend the string to also check for email, which I'm going to do right now. I'm going to create a function called onString dot and call it is email. So I guess that's what I had done. So is email, that's going to be of type boolean again, Kotlin boolean. And here I'm going to return text utils has is coming with an empty check, and I'm going to do whether if it is not empty, I'm going to say if this is not, if this string that we are checking, if it is not empty and it's going to validate against a regular expression to see whether the string is an email or not. That's what we're going to do. So Android, we can use Android utils dot we have the patterns util dot patterns dot email address. I'm gonna check that with the matcher. This matcher is this, my value, if it can matches, so then it's an email. So I'm just checking 2 things we are checking here. One is that whether this text input that we are looking for, this string, whatever we are going to check, let's say here email.value is going to be non-empty, which anyway we are doing here, but then again a second check is happening here. And also we are checking using Android patterns email matcher whether this string is an email string or not. This is again a regular expression check. So with this we'll be able to see whether the string is an email or not. So now, because we have already extended the string to have an email field, email function as well to check, then I can also do that over here. After this check, I can just say and email dot is email dot value is email. That's what I'm checking. But because this can be an optional, we need to do force casting. I think this is called double whammy. I don't know what, some name is being used over here to downcast it. If it's more of a null check, if you are pretty sure that this is not going to fail, because if anyway we are doing a check over here, then it's safe to force cast it to the string value. Otherwise it's going to throw a null pointer exception. But I know it's not going to throw because we already done a check over here. I can do a double exclamation, which actually makes it force casts it to the string value, and then I can check for the email, which I have extended over here. So that's what you're doing here. And then the other check is also there. So 2 things we already done. So any change happening to email, it's going to validate, and then it's going to give me the login, the first validation. Anyway, it's going to set the enable login. So this is already done. So we are pretty good over here in terms of creation of a view model, which can now be data bound with my the layout. So I have the enable login, which I'm going to bind with the table with the button, login button, to enable or disable. I'm going to bind it, the email, with the text, edit text which I had created, which propagates all the changes happening on entry led to that login field. Password, again similar, it's going to be a hidden field, hidden in the sense secured field. Even those changes are going to get captured and sent to the view model whenever there is a change happening. So view model knows everything. It knows the state of the view or at any point in time. So I think with this, let's maybe go back to our view to do the binding. So I'm gonna maybe just keep the code side, and let me rerun. Let's see whether it's also showing all the fields. Let's do that. Yep, so we have the account, enter email, enter password fields available, and that's pretty much the beginning of the changes which we need to do. So one of the things that we have to do right now for data binding to work is that we need to add something called as a layout to include everything over here. So this is what the first change is. We need to have something called as a layout, and layout has to have these two things instead of the constraint layout. So I'm gonna use those two over there, and then I'm gonna move everything inside that layout, the constraint layout inside the layout. That's the first change we are going to do. It's not breaking anything because that is something which is needed for data binding. And the next part is that within layout I need to have something called as data, and data is going to accept couple of things. First thing is called I guess name. Did I have it correctly? I think it's called a variable. Let me just refer it once. Okay, we need to have something called within a data. We need to have something called as a variable, and this variable is going to take a name which we can maybe call as the login view model, just an identifier, and the type is going to be the view model. So we need to call view model com dot let's go easy dot apps dot login dot view models dot login view model. So that gives the reference to the view model. I think this, if you let's do a build right now and see whether it's able to build this whole thing, or did we miss anything? I don't think we have, but still, let's see once. Build is successful. That's what it shows. So let's go and start the data binding works to begin with. So text is something we need to data bind, because let's say if you run it, edit text is something we need to data bind. So we don't have that data binding right now, and that's the reason the login is also not working, because we are not bound it yet. So first thing was, let's bind this enabled, which is going to be through the data binding. So for that you need to start with at the rate and then close it, then open it and close braces, and then I can always say login view model dot enable login, I guess. So if I run this now, nothing is happening. So that means our data binding is not ready. So for this to work, we need to go back to our login activity, and then there are some of the things which we need to still do here, and those things, let's start with that. So first thing first, we need to capture the binding which is inherently happening, the view binding. We need to get that view binding in place. So for that, let's get the latent where the binding. So latent is, if you are coming from an iOS background, Swift uses something called as lazy-ware, which is like instantiate at a later point, just keep it ready for future use kind of. So we can always keep it instantiated like this, but then only once you start using it, that real instantiation will happen. That's the reason here in Swift, in Kotlin, it's called as latent late in it, and then it has to be kept as a var. Even in Swift, it's the same case even here. So this is going to be activity login binding. So this is auto generated. This is one thing which we don't have any control over, because this is being created by Android in using the Android X binding framework. I think Android X binding, if you can see, look, it being generated, so we don't need to do much over there. But then we have to use this to create the binding has to be set to the view. So for that, the other step that we need to do is so we can get rid of the set content view. It's an old way of doing it. We can instead use the set content view using the binding. So maybe we can just comment it out, and then I'm just going to call binding is going to be using the binding utilities, data binding util dot. I'm going to call the set content view of this instead, and we need to pass the activity instance and also the layout. So layout is going to be r dot layout dot activity login. I guess that will resolve it. So this is the first step. So I'm going to get rid of this set content view which was earlier there. I think that's not breaking anything yet. So this is the first step to use the binding. This is the view binding part of it. Now we also need to have the data binding part to work. For that we need to enable the view model binding as well. So for that, okay, this is anyway the first bit of it, and then let's do the data binding part now. I guess we also need to have the view model. So some of the things which are auto generated are anyway with not in our control. Again, some even view model to an extent is going to be using some of the inherent features coming with Android, so we can only instantiate even this. So I'm going to call view model. This is again interesting, that how do I instantiate a view model. So there is something called as a Viewmodel Provider which is coming with the Android X lifecycle event. So again, state is completely handled internally by Android X lifecycle library itself. So all that we need to do is to consume it. So owner, this view model provider, pass the owner, which is this activity, and then I can just say get the view model, which is very simple. Get model class. I'm going to say login. It's more of a factory implementation happening. View model class, view model class Java. So that's it. So your view model instance is also created by a factory which is maybe sitting within this provider. So this is more of a creates that instance for you. This factory does that for you. So view model is also created for us. Now that whatever we need to do is to bind this with this. So for that we can do a binding dot view model, login view model. So this already knows internally because everything is generated, and this binding in itself knows that login view model is what is the view model which needs to be used for this. Somehow that's internally happening. So we just need to point it to this view model instance which we created. That anyway will create our binding with the view model. So it's pretty interesting. A little scary because there is no much control on our side. Everything is abstracted to a great extent, and all that we need to do is to use it the way it is, and it becomes more like a framework that we can use. And not much control on our end. So that's the interesting part about this view model implementation. Slightly scary, but then yeah, that's the way it is. There is no harm in using this way as well. And then the last part is the lifecycle part. Lifecycle owner for this is going to be again this class itself. So binding lifecycle owner is this class. So login activity, everything is now tightly integrated, the view model, the view, and everything. So the layout. So I guess with this change, with all of these changes which I have done, I think the whatever binding which we had done for this login enabling, I'm hoping it's going to work now. So let's try that now. I'm gonna run. Boom. So you can see it's already disabled, but then even if, let's say, I enter something, it's not going to get reflected because other data binding is not complete. We are not bound these fields with these two. So that's the reason whatever change I'm making is only modifying, or at least it's not listening to those changes because this binding is not done, but at least it's picking up the initial values from the from this init validation. Login must be having its initial value something. So that's what it is picking up. One more thing which we need to have along with the init test, we need to inherit or override the on cleared. That's where I'm gonna remove these sources. So otherwise you're going to end up with memory leaks. Remove source. I'm gonna say, what do I say? If I'm going to remove the source, so I'm just going to say remove the email source and remove the password source. Both of these, that needs to be removed when this view model is clearing. Otherwise these memories will be retained and there will be cyclic retention. So maybe that's the reason we need to override and do this part. So that's also done. So let's go back to our activity login and then do the data binding for these edit fields. So text view edit, I'm gonna start with somewhere here. I'm gonna keep under the hint text edit because it's going to be two-way binding. I think this is the way we need to do, is equal to, I'm hoping that's the reason. So login view dot email is the first field I'm binding with, and then the password. So after the hint text at the rate login view model dot password. So that's the second field. So I guess now the other magic will start working because we have the data binding set up right now. So let's just run and see. So let's do that. wish@mail.com. As soon as I enter, this is enabled. As soon as I remove, so this data binding has started working right now. So that it's coming to the view model, setting it values for sure. So if, let's say, go to the debug mode, we can see that it's going to fire for sure. So it's already waiting for debugger. It's there. Fired it. Okay, I did the wrong stuff. Okay, go here. As soon as I type something, it's validating. So that's the reason this is setting, and it's instead it's going and going to the layout and then modifying. So this is data binding working for you. These three are data bound. View binding, we can also look at view binding because one thing I'm going to do is to fire a login tap event as soon as these fields are enabled, where we can use that view binding part. So this is fine. Now let's also, I'm gonna add a view binding. So let's say these two fields are already entered. Again, I'm updating the field. Let's say I'm entering these, and then if I need to tap on this, I need to send that tap to the view model. So for that, let's do a binding again. I'm going to go back to my login view, and I'm going to create a function called on login, and this is going to do a login, but then I'm going to make it a little more interesting on. So I'm going to do something called as I'm creating a closure so that I can send it after, let's say, a login is complete. I can send this value back to the activity itself. So closure is normally created in Kotlin in this way. This is called lambdas, I guess, where I can pass a string value which can be a success message, and then I need to have something called as a unit as the other part. So normally I used to do this way in let's say in a Swift or something, but then here it looks like it's called a unit. I don't know what really the type of one value, the unit object type corresponding to the void type in Java. It's more like the void itself. So in Kotlin they're calling it as unit, so otherwise we would have called it a void or something. So that's it. That's pretty much what it is. Let's say on login finish. So in login I'm not going to implement today the feature of making an API call and then getting a success token back or something, but then I'm gonna keep a to do for that. I'm just gonna say login feature to be implemented, but for the time being we are going to send a finish callback. So that's what we're gonna do. So we're gonna say first thing, let's maybe log it. So there is a print available with Kotlin, I guess, and we can just say user I think again you can user dollar email dot value print user email logged in successfully. So this is more like I'm just sending a message back saying that the user has logged in, but we need to really implement this and then see how the login management will work. But then again, I'm not sure how to still need to look at how I can do what do you call as a thread dispatch from main thread to the background thread and everything using live data. I think I am hearing already people moving towards stateflow or something, because of the same reason that it does not really gel well when you want to move from one thread to the other, from main to the background and background to the main and everything. So the reason maybe people are avoiding live data and maybe moving towards something else. I'm not pretty sure, but then that's something I still need to venture into. But then this is how it is. So I can then create a message with similar like this, user dollar email dot value. Do I need to? I think this is how you do it. Email dot value logged in successfully. So this I'm just sending it back. Value logged in successfully. So all that I'm going to do is to toast this one from the activity. So I have this message. I'm just going to say finish using the lambda function, and I'm just going to pass this message through that. So this is how you implement a lambda and then return a response back. So I guess there are no returns and everything here. It's just one function. Idea is to just show you how to maybe implement a on-click event coming to a login, coming to a view model, and then it responds with a callback or something. So that's the idea here. So I have this login function, but I'm not going to bind it with the activity login, because there is a parameter which is more of a lambda, which I don't think I can really use within the layout. It's better that I do it from the activity itself. So I'm just going to do that over here. So I'm just going to say binding dot button login set on click listener listener, set on click listener. I'm just gonna do that. I don't think I need to do anything more, because that's how this works. So then I can just pass a view model, and then I can just say on login, and then this is again a callback. This is where I have a little I'm skeptical about how this is going to work. Is this going to if I'm directly calling this within this is it going to lead to a memory leak or something? I'm not aware of it. So is that how do you use it? Because in, let's say, in Android and in iOS, I can directly do this, which is my capturing within a closure and then passing it, so that I don't have a memory leak issue. But then I need to venture out a little more here and understand that. But this is what is happening. I am doing a button click. Let's say this login button click is going to get me over here through this ViewBinding button clicks. I have set up a listener, and then within that listener closure, I'm gonna call the view models on login, but on login function, which I had written here. So that's already showing highlighted because it's already in use right now. And then it's going to do nothing more. Just it's going to create a message using the email value, and then return that to the activity again, and then we are going to toast it over here. So that's what I'm going to do. Toast make context. I'm just gonna say the context is going to be this activity itself, and then message is going to be it dot, I guess it does what we need to use something like an it, which is the string which needs to be shown, and the duration is going to be toast message dot length long, and then I'm going to show it. So I guess this is what is going to happen right now. Let's see whether this works or not. So this is the end-to-end flow of the basic login which we are going to do. So maybe I'm going to keep let's see whether it traverses through the whole flow. It has to come here and then finish and go back. I'm going to debug. It's launching it. So let's do that part now. I'm gonna say wish@gmail.com. Password is going to be test. Okay, that's enough. I'm just not going to validate that. But then on login, it takes me to the finish. I hope it's showing the perfect message. See, user wish@gmail.com is logged in successfully. That's also working. So I can get rid of this. Go to this part. It's also coming to this toast now, and it's going to toast it. So that's what you're going to show, at least see here. Toast user wish@gmail.com logged in successfully. That's also working. Toast it once more. Yep, so that's working. So this was basically the idea behind this episode, just to have at least I'm also learning here, and then I wanted to really I had worked on Android long back, maybe 5 years back, but then not with the data binding. I was pretty much trying to use RX Java at that time, but then I did not do that. I moved on to work on iOS projects, but then I'm back with Kotlin right now on Android, and it has brought in lots of stuff like live data binding, view binding, lots of stuff, to including the Kotlin integration. So which is pretty interesting, making it little understandable code and not too much of writing code here. So this is pretty interesting. I think hope this was a good start even for you guys if you are new to Kotlin. If not, hopefully you understood at least the viewpoint or the perspective of an iOS developer looking at an Android project and trying to at least bringing the best practices, or trying to understand both the worlds, and maybe trying to include the learnings from that side of things. So that's what I was trying to do here. More things are coming up pretty soon, but then this is what I wanted to at least begin with, is a basic layout. But then let's do some more stuff where I'll be making an API call to validate this user. I have a good project to work on that. So I have a grocery app which I can work on, and then bring that logic over here. That's a pretty good app where I had the login flow and everything available. Maybe I can bring all of that features in this Kotlin version, so that it becomes a good use case to work on. So stay subscribed, like this video, share it if you liked it, and then watch out for more episodes. Codebase will be made available to my Patreon site if you want to actually support my cause. Until the next episode, it's bye from me.